My understanding of the disaster relief is it's an insurance program and it is paid for, and I'm not opposed to that.
Dr. Paul, have you decided to vote for Senator McConnell for leadership?
I don't know why that's always a tough question because it's a hypothetical question, but I am a very big fan of Senator McConnell. I think that he's been a great minority leader, and I can see no reason why I won't vote for him for leader. And that's the best I can do since there really isn't a race or anything going on. But I do emphasize, and part of my reason, people say, oh, well, why are you hedging? Why are you not saying this? It's because I want people to know that I am a distinct person and that I will be an independent voice for Kentucky in the U.S. Senate, and that I won't be a rubber stamp for anyone. And I think people who have heard me over the last year know that I am an independent voice, and when I think the Republicans have done a bad job with the deficit, I'm more than happy to stand up and say so.
When you took issue with Jack's statement that you favor getting rid of the Department of Agriculture, what exactly do you see as the role of the Department of Agriculture, and what programs are good, what programs you get rid of?
It's always funny because I've been in public life and not been afraid to speak my mind probably for 20 some odd years. And so people always say, well, did you say this? And it's like, well, I don't know. It's been 20 years of me popping off and saying what I thought. But I don't think I've ever said that I was for getting rid of the Department of Agriculture. If I did say that, that's not my position. But I don't think I've ever said that. And a lot of times people get conflated with other people saying things, and all of a sudden I'm something that I never said. But I'm not in favor of getting rid of the Department of Agriculture.
What parts of the Department of Agriculture, what programs do you support?
Well, what you have to do is, I think to every government program, this is why it's a little more complicated than saying, where is your blueprint for what you're going to do? What I say is nothing is off the table. And that's a pretty dramatic statement. That alone should make people sit up and pay attention that I'm serious about balancing the budget and serious about the deficit. That doesn't mean I'm opposed to every program in the Department of Agriculture. What you have to do is you take a stepwise process. Christopher Edwards from Cato has talked about this in Downsizing Government. You ask first, can it be downsized? Can it be eliminated? Can it be privatized? Or can we do nothing? There will be some programs we cannot touch. But I think if you don't address it, if you don't get someone who is unafraid to speak their mind, for example, we spend $1 billion on 3 agribusinesses. Can we do that when we're running a $2 trillion deficit? Is it right to borrow money from China to give 3 companies $1 billion? I think that is clearly wrong, and I think the American people would agree with me on that.
Because Kentucky is a net importer of federal dollars, though, I mean, is it your contention that it's okay for Kentucky to suffer or sacrifice our take of the federal budget if, in
Right.
fact, these restrictions that you want to put in place are
Right.
there?
Well, I don't think that anything coming from the federal government is a net plus. It's still all of our money, and right now we're spending $2 trillion more than we take in. So would it be right simply to say, oh, you live in West Virginia and you get $5 for every dollar you send up there? What's a gravy train? Let's just continue it. Well, I think that would be wrong as an American because I think the deficit is enormous and threatens our country. The other thing about it is that, think about it this way. There are 2 pies of money. One is the private sector and one is government. And we're going to keep feeding the monster of government, but as a consequence, the money's being taken from somewhere. So the money's being taken from the private sector that could create useful jobs.
Dr. Paul, do you think tax increases are ever justified, say, to pay down the debt?
I think that government has grown too large by having too much federal spending, and I think we should cut federal spending. So I see the size and scope of government as being way beyond its constitutional foundations. The Constitution talked about what government should spend, what were the enumerated powers, and we have a government that's grown way too large. So at this point in our history, at this point in our fiscal nightmare, it has to be about cutting spending.
Say we do cut spending and we still need money to pay down the debt. Are tax increases ever justified?
We pay nearly 50% of our income in taxes, and I don't think it's a good idea to have higher taxes. I'm for lowering tax burden, but only if you'll lower the spending burden.
Mr. Paul, there's been a lot of polls coming out in the last couple weeks with you ahead or the race close. Do you feel like you're ahead, and what's your strategy the rest of the way?
Good question. I like that. Yes, we are ahead. I like that, but we run like we're behind. If anything, I think we're out hustling the opposition. I work full-time job. I did 7 surgeries on Tuesday. I saw 15 patients on Tuesday, did a national interview, and then traveled across the state and gave a speech in Frankfurt. So I'm traveling every day, working full-time because I'm like a lot of Americans. I have mortgages to pay and bills to pay, so I continue to work. But I also continue to travel and give a lot of speeches, and we run as if it's a tie race, but most of the polls show us ahead.
Dr. Paul, you referenced once that it was somewhat of a difficult message you were giving to the farmers over here today. Do you consider it to be a hostile environment?
Not at all. No, I think a very friendly environment. In fact, if they aren't on my side, they've gone to great lengths to be the most cordial people that I've met in a long time. But what I would say is, and this is what's interesting, is some people will try to simplify this and say it's only about farm subsidies. Well, farmers are complicated people like you and I, and they have a lot of different beliefs. For example, there are a lot of farmers who are like me that are pro-life, and I don't think they'll accept the other side being pro-abortion. There are a lot of them who are religious and traditional Christian conservatives, and I don't think they'll accept some of what the other side's going to talk about or what the other side believes in. So I think that affects also how they vote and how they make their decision-making process. I think they're good American people like you and I are good American people in the sense that they are worried about the debt. I think if you talk to them and ask them, should 3 companies get $1 billion in farm subsidies, I think probably to a person in that boardroom they'll say, that sounds like an abuse. So I think there is much commonality, and I do believe farming is important, and I will be a great defender and always have been a great defender of business. And farming is a business. It has unique aspects, but capitalism, which I'm a great believer and defender of, supports business of all colors, stripes, and forms. And so I will be a big defender of the farming community.
Overstepping its reach by doing things like banning insecticides?
Well, one of the things they're talking about, is the navigable waters. Water collects on part of your land, and they can call it a wetlands. There was a developer put in jail in Michigan for digging a pond on his land. I mean, the EPA is way out of control, not only in farming, but in coal. What I would say is the EPA shouldn't write their own rules. I think rules should be approved by Congress, and I think it's a breach of traditional constitutional thinking that we give up power to an agency to write its bills. Lisa Murkowski had a bill recently, and it went down 53-47, but in that bill she said simply the EPA should not be allowed to write its own greenhouse gas emissions testing without congressional authority. And that sounds to me very simple. I can't imagine anybody voting against it. But that's where the distinction is that Jack and the leaders of his party, or at least the leaders of his party, all voted against that proposition.
We've got time for just one more question.
Let's do somebody who hasn't asked a question yet.
The biggest hurdle going to be going against Jack Conway, who is running as more of a moderate to conservative Democrat.
I don't think it's a hurdle for me. I think it's a hurdle for him. We'll see how fast he can run away from President Obama. I mean, he's going to have to run away from all of his policies. President Obama is going to let the Bush tax cuts expire. Now, while Jack says, well, I'm really not for that, he's already come out in favor of the estate tax, and that is one of the tax cuts. Let's pin him down on every one of them. Is he going to vote with the Republicans? And then let's ask him the question, if you're going to vote with the Republicans, why don't you become a Republican? He's running with President Obama, and he will vote for Harry Reid. There's no question. It's not a question of who will be the leader. Harry Reid is the leader and will be the leader of the Democrats if they stay in power, and Jack Conway will be a vote for that. And is he going to vote for President Obama's policies? He's for the health care. See, I have it easy, I think, because the people of Kentucky, only about 35% of them are for President Obama's health care plan. So I have it easy. They're on my side on that issue. Poll farmers and ask them, how many of you guys want an estate tax to come back? I bet you're going to get close to zero. He's going to have to explain how he's going to try to have some exemptions for farms and this and that. But there's a danger. There's always a danger to bringing a tax back that you've gotten rid of, that it'll be amended, and all of a sudden the exemptions may say, oh, we'll only get the rich farmer with the estate tax, and all of a sudden you're like, well, I didn't know I was rich, and now I'm not exempt and my farm's going to be taxed. So I think there is great danger to that. I think the problem will be more for him running away from President Obama's policies than it will be for me, because I think people in Kentucky Kentucky are conservative. Democrat, Independent, Republican, they're socially conservative. He's not. And they're fiscally conservative, and he may or may not be, but the National Party's not. Thank you very much.